Today, in the media conference with Goel, which is brought to you by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Gaon Se, Samvad Sarokar News, Bharat Post News, Organ Donation India Foundation, and Gyan. Our endeavor is to enlighten you with the current topic, and today's topic is not only current but very, very hot, or you can say very recent topic. The topic whomsoever I discussed, they says they've never heard about the topic. So it's a good thing that we are coming to some type of topic where the people can be educated and enlightened. And today's topic is humanistic management. And today's topic is also been brought to you by Indo-Gulf Management Association. Humanistic management. Before I will go on that, I would like to inform you that today the world is celebrating World Pharmacist Day. Millions of pharmacists globally celebrate World Pharmacist Day every year on September 25th. The day is celebrated to highlight the value of the pharmacy profession worldwide. It was originally adopted in 2009 at the World Congress of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. The International Pharmaceutical Federation, FIP, announced this year's theme, Pharmacy, Always Trusted for Your Health. The purpose of World Pharmacist Day, which was brought to life at the FIP Council 2009 in Istanbul, is to encourage activities that promote and advocate for the role of the pharmacist in improving health in every corner of the world. Pharmacists are the reason why people get the best from their medicines. They are using their experience, knowledge, and expertise to make the medical world a better place for everybody. Moreover, they give access to medicines, advise people on how to properly take them, and so much more. The aim is to show how pharmacists contribute to a world where everyone benefits from access to effective, quality, and affordable medicines and health technologies, as well as from pharmaceutical care services. Media conference with Goel congratulate and extend thanks to the pharmacists all over the world for their daily great work, especially in this time of a pandemic. Now coming to our main topic, that is humanistic management. Let's remove the words human resource from the organizational common vocabulary. Human beings are not mere resources. Human beings are not a capital. Human beings are not the means, but an end in themselves. Humanistic management is a people-oriented management that seeks profits for human ends. It contrasts with other types of management that are essentially oriented towards profit, with people seen as mere resources to serve this goal. Today, we will try to know the historical development of humanistic management and the ever-increasing body of the literature on the concept, as well as the different meanings that scholars attribute to it through our very, very renowned and those who are knowledgeable panelists. The 7 factors of a genuine humanism are labeled as wholeness, comprehensive knowledge, human dignity, development, common good, transcendence, and stewardship, sustainability. The 4 characteristics of a humanistic ethos for managing business: the view of the individual and human work, the role of the individual in the society and in interacting with nature, the business form, and the purpose of business in society. Humanistic management, HM, understood in a very broad sense, regards concerns for persons and human aspects in managing organizations. It is oriented not only to obtaining results through people, but also and above all toward people themselves, showing care for their flourishing and well-being. Some have discussed HM by introducing human psychology in management or by seeing the centrality of people as essential for a successful business management. Others appeal for a shift in the mainstream economistic pattern and the placing of human persons and their flourishing and well-being as the fundamental management orientation. The humanistic management movement, which emerged in the first decade of the 21st century with significant precedents in the last third of the 20th century. This movement has gained momentum since 2010, and an increasing number of scholars and business executives are showing interest in HM. Although many would probably agree with the broad basic description of HM as concern for persons and human aspects in managing organizations, this is too generic. Thus, a question arises, what do scholars mean by humanistic management? Humanistic management is a distinct perspective on management in which people matter. Ever heard of human resources, human capital, human as most important assets? All these terms denote people as a means to the end of some organizational purpose, say productivity or shareholder value. None of these terms indicate the intrinsic value of human beings as humans first and foremost. That inherent value humanistic management practitioners label dignity. Now, of course, not only human beings possesses dignity, all life does. Still, the mainstream approach to management silently assumes that if something is not measured, it cannot be managed. As a consequence of such thinking, those things that have a price take priority over those that do not, say human integrity, environmental beauty, or quality of life. This process is also often described as commodification, and current reality shows that all the commodities traded on some exchange are part of the public conversations like oil, stock, and bonds. Much more so than what makes life worthwhile. Humanistic management aims to create a more balanced relationship between those things that can be exchanged on markets and those that are not but make life worthwhile. That is human dignity and well-being. Markets are an important tool and can help protect dignity and contribute to well-being, but our organizing practices need to encompass an understanding for inherent value and values that matter. Humanistic management, therefore, creates a higher awareness of who we are as human beings, what matters to us, and how we can lead a good life that does not cost the earth. And to discuss this, a very, very new concept or new things, that is humanistic management, we have a very elite, knowledgeable, those who are authority in this field, panelists with us. And I would like to invite my first panelist. He is Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal is the former Professor of Marketing, Innovation and Management, IIM Lucknow, XLRI Jamshedpur, and California State University, USA. He is President of Indo-Gulf Management Association. He is US Fulbright Fellow Boston, EFMD Fellow Paris, and British Council Fellow London. In 2019, he was ranked among the 251 most fabulous global education leaders. Welcome, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, today's topic is something which is not common. And it's a very new concept has been developed, that is the humanistic management. We would like to know from you more about this particular thing, that is humanistic management, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, please.
Many thanks, Mr. Goel, for this erudite commentary, for this wonderful introduction, excellent summary. I think even after listening to you, the topic doesn't seem any strange or unfamiliar anymore. The way you have described the evolution, the way you have described the essence of it, and the way you have described the empathy of organizations as a requirement towards well-being of the society, and that has to be for the people. I think today is, I know that you paid tributes to the pharmacy and all those things. Today is also a very red letter day, at least in our relationship, Mr. Goel, that we have today two worlds, very well-known stalwarts in humanistic management, who are not just telling us what it is, but they are also involved in creating what it is in terms of their research, in terms of their, both Professor Ernst Kimokowitz and Professor Wolgow, both of them have done phenomenal work, and anyone can see that. Even someone does, even the top research in Google, that how much work they have done. We are also very grateful to another gentleman, our own fellow Indian, who is here, Dr. Shiv Tripathi, who is back to India after a decade or maybe more than that of serving outside India, coming up with this kind of thoughts, coming up with this kind of resources in his belt, in which he's talking about things like human resource network or human network or many other things, human management network. Or in other words, we are talking about things which should be talked about, not the things which we need to, but we want to and we must. So let me just say a few things through certain stories, because you have already described the concept, and one of the requirements of any professor is not to lay one concept after another in order to explain the concept, but to provide some illustration so that people are able to relate to what they are saying. And there is probably a story which is apocryphal to a very large extent. Apocryphal means something which is not sure, true or not, or accurate or not, but still it is talked about as if it is a true story. And then I will follow with another example of our own country, which is true and which is not at all apocryphal, but which is totally accurate, verifiable and all. And hopefully those two instances will clarify the concept of humanistic management and its approach and its future. The first story is of a person, a senior supervisor, quality control manager. Let's call that person John for the sake of our understanding. And whenever John entered the factory, the first thing he would do was to salute the security guard who was at the gate to let people in, where people had to show their ID card. And then, thereafter they will get in. Everybody knowed everyone because it was not a big factory. But then at the same time, he would always make sure that he will say hello to him the first thing in the morning, and will also say goodbye when he leaves the work to the security people. People were very aware of what he did as a supervisor, as a human being. Now, one day, the same supervisor, it was a meat factory, and it required a very huge amount, a very high degree of cold atmosphere inside in order to store the beef and all other kind of products. So he had gone there to check some mechanical problem. Being a quality control manager, he went there and he tried to check that particular thing. Now, the warehouse, the cold warehouse, did not have any handle from inside. It only had from outside. Means people can open it, but nobody could open it from inside. So when he went inside, somehow, to his misfortune, the door got closed. And John was trapped into this cold, very cold, freezing kind of warehouse of his own factory. And nobody knew at that particular time that John was inside and that this was happening. And the life went on the whole day, and John started counting, the hours to his death, because he knew that something like this would happen. There's no other way unless somebody comes, and nobody has any occasion to come inside, because the area was very secluded and like that. In the evening, as he was just praying, or maybe last praying, or making his last prayer, he suddenly found someone opened the warehouse. And here it was, that security guy with a torch in his hand and looking for Mr. John everywhere. And he found John, and he obviously saved the life of John. John came out, and as a result, he was saved. People asked him that, how did you know that John will be inside that particular warehouse? His colleague said. He said that this gentleman always saluted me when I entered the thing, and will always said bye to me before we ended for the day. And when I went, when I noticed that Mr. John did not come and say bye to me, I got worried. What happened? And I started looking for him everywhere, and I didn't find him everywhere. And I thought this must be the last place, but still let me check out whether Mr. John was there or not. And he found. This is the point which I wanted to derive, that if human beings' lives can be saved by humanistic management, the way you have described, then the organizations could also be very well saved. In the same way, where human and organizations work together for the same purpose, rather than being one a resource for the other or a tool of the other, both are becoming the purpose of the business itself. Now, that is one story which I said that apocryphal to some extent, but still makes the point in my humble judgment. But the second one is very, very clear and can be Googled out for verification. And his name is Mr. Shaoji Dholakia. He is based in the western part of India called Surat. And he is the richest diamond merchant in the world today. Richest diamond merchant. We are talking about almost $20-30 billion worth. Dholakia has a habit, a reputation, where he shares his wealth with his employees almost in unheard manners, gifting homes to the employees, gifting expensive cars to the employees, gifting anything that employees may not need. And he is becoming such a force, Dholakia, that he is mentioned everywhere as a generous billionaire, a person who shares his wealth. Now, there are many people who donate money, but they donate money in order to enhance their own reputation, their own ranking, and their own brand ranking in various lists of the people that we see. Dholakia doesn't do any of that. He does it only for his own people. He takes care of them in terms of marriage, in education, everything. And that is the reason what happened in the last 2 years in terms of corona, in terms of lockdown, in terms of slowed down business. Dholakia did not lose money. His business did not lose any momentum. He continued to do the work that he was doing. Why? Because the heart of the people was inside the point he was making. Because the spirit of people was clearly demonstrable to those people, rather than seeing it as something to get something out. Bonuses are not unheard of. Bonuses are always there. But the fact of the matter here is that here it is much, much more than that. So a humanistic management is an approach where human resource is not being managed. Humanistic management is one where the management is all about humanism. The ability of the person to the core of that particular person. And as you mentioned already about 7 principles of humanistic management, 2 principles to me really touch me. Number 1 to me is human decency. How decent you are for them. How decent your behavior-wise you are. We have wonderful theories of Americanism, which says hire and fire. We also have equally wonderful theory in Japan called lifetime guaranteed employment. We also have in India something similar to that. Tatas have done that very recently, in which he said, Ratan Tata, the emeritus chairman of Tata, who said that anyone who died any employee who died in Corona, his family, if he was the only sole breadwinner, that particular family will continue to get the salary till the point the person would have retired. Till the point the person would have retired. Of course, there are many people who have done something similar, but not exactly what I am saying in terms of Tatas. Now, they are again to me a paragon of humanistic management. Number of times I had, I'm living a very blessed life. And in that blessed life, one of the blessing is that I met personally, sat with the side by side to the greatest management man, in my opinion, in India, and which is G.R.D. Tata. G.R.D. Tata and I sat for hours together in places like Jamshedpur or Tata Nagar in India. And what a man he was. Even though he was perhaps the only billionaire at that time, but he never showed up all this, never lost his place, never lost his touch, never lost him. So the point which I'm trying to make here is that when we talk about human dignity, when we talk about human well-being, when we reject the theories which says Milton Friedman kind of theories, that the business of business is business. In fact, at one point of time, I had said this, that the business of business is good business. The business of business is not business, but business of business is good business. So from that point of view, I would say here, we are in a wonderful era where people like, Professor Ernst, Professor Wolfgang, Professor Shiv are there, who will be talking about how this concept is developing, expanding, and I would like to enjoy listening to them. So thank you very much, Mr. Goel, for giving me this opportunity to introduce the thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agarwal, for giving the illustration. And very beautifully, I must say that you have given 2-3 examples, one of Mr. John, which you have put the name, and how he was saved because of his only one characteristic, that he used to give the honor to the humanity, and he to wish the watchman, which practically, if we will see today in our time, we think it's below dignity to wish our own staff or a person like for a watchman. And if we will wish, we feel that we always expect that they should wish us. So that was the one thing you have given. And Professor Agrawal has also mentioned about Mr. Dholakia, who is not only the rich person, but he's rich by heart, how generous he is. And not only his gifting, but he's seeing that the mass weddings are taking place of all the employees or those, and he's funding everything. So, and that's the result, that during the COVID time, his business could not stop. But because the employee of that organization, his organization wants to repay him during the difficult time. So it's a give and take of a humanity. It is nothing that the money is playing the game. It's not the money, but the generosity, what he has shown, he's reaping the fruit. And he has also mentioned about Ratan Tata, how he has mentioned, and we have seen his generosity, how he has shown his boldness and his generosity during the difficult time of the Mumbai attack. And afterwards, now also during the COVID time, the way he's been, but he never wanted to be projected as a donor or something philanthropist. He says, I am what I am doing. And he has also mentioned about G.R.D. Tata. So now these are few examples, but there are many. But the problem is that we still are not understanding the values of the humanity. And that is why the human management is very much required in the present time if one wants to be a successful businessman. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Agrawal, for giving your such a nice illustration. I'm sure many of our viewers who are worried or who are not understanding what is this particular topic will understand now quite a lot. But definitely we will be having three more very eminent personalities with us. We would like to discuss, listen their views also. So thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Now I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he is Professor Dr. Wolfgang Amann. Professor Dr. Wolfgang is the academic director of HEC Paris at Qatar. Professor Dr. Wolfgang graduated from the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland with a doctorate in international strategy. He is also a graduate of key faculty development programs such as Harvard University's MLE, IESE's, IFP, IMD's, ITP, the EFMD International Deans Program, and Siemens IMTA. He currently serves as Professor of Strategy and Leadership, as well as the Academic Director of Degree, Open Enrollment and Custom Programs of HEC Paris in Qatar. Welcome, Professor Dr. Wolfgang, on our show. Professor Dr. Wolfgang, you have heard what Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal has tried to explain to our viewers by giving the illustrations, by narrating few of the stories, or I must say the realities which are happening in India, which has happened in India and other countries also. But still, we would like to know from you your views on the humanity management. Professor Dr. Wolfgang Amann, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and a warm good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you join us today and whenever you will watch this as this is a recorded session. Thank you so much for having me. And indeed, we have the opportunity to talk about humanistic management in more detail today, which is outstanding. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Let me just clarify, ladies and gentlemen, that I think we have two problems. The first problem is the following. I think today we are drowning in information. We spend more time on our phones than on TV. It's hours and hours and hours. We reach 250 times or more, for our phones every day. Wherever you go, you're flooded by information and knowledge. Each business school provides free lectures, consulting companies give reports and sessions. It seems quite paradoxical that the more information we have, the more we drown in knowledge, the less we seem to know what to do. And in that sense, I think humanistic management provides a wonderful point of orientation when it comes to its focus on human dignity. So in order to cope with this drowning in information, let me be very precise and concise today and focus on this human dignity. The second problem we have is the following. A wise person said, people were created to be loved and things were created to be used. The problem we have, and the reason why the world is in chaos, is that it's because things are loved and people are used. And I think that clarifies a lot of the origins of our troubles that we have. And French socialists, Boltanski and Thévenot, they say, we have an economics of value. We have circles of groups that value things differently. We have the more people-oriented ones, we have the more capital returns-oriented ones, we have the politicians, and whenever these circles try to discuss things with each other, they get into trouble because they follow slightly different, at times at least, different interests. And if we love things and not people, then no matter where we are, we clash with some of the circles we are in interaction with. In the Middle East, we have this great concept of falah economy. All business should serve the creation of well-being and a better future. We have in India the concept of karma management. If we misuse people, there will be consequences. So in that sense, similar doubts about a misuse of people, a too strong view of them as resources, I think we find universally around the world. And this is not just a general debate. I think COVID has drastically increased the need for much more humanistic management. PricewaterhouseCoopers came up with this interesting acronym, ADAPT. when it comes to the consequences of COVID. ADAPT stands for asymmetry. The rich individuals, the rich countries, the rich organizations got richer during COVID, and same holds true for the other side. And this is something we need to have a solution for. Then the next letter in the word ADAPT stands for disruption. A lot got disrupted. Look into the travel industry, look into many others. We have disruption, and that causes adversity. And even in times of more adversity, we need to have clear orientation what to do. And I think a focus on human dignity can help us. And then the next letter in the word ADAPT, in this acronym of ADAPT, stands for age. We have certain groups of society, like the elderly, that suffered disproportionately by COVID. They couldn't be visited. They were more at risk, and so on. The P in ADAPT stands for polarization. The world got much more polarized. We made a lot of progress when it comes to multilateralism, solving our problems together, joining forces with other countries. This somewhat got reversed as each country tried to solve its own issues and secure vaccines. So these are some special factors to consider. And finally, the T, the trust has gone down during COVID. Some distrust the government because they force vaccinations. Some distrust the government because they do not make enough progress when it comes to dealing with those that want to have or do not want to have vaccines. So in that sense, it is quite a challenging time. And this is the second problem where humanistic management can help. And are there solutions? Is there sort of a silver lining on the horizon? And we from the Humanistic Management Network think that there is. Let us focus on human dignity. And I would leave a little bit of space and opportunity to Ernst and Schiff also to elaborate on that later. So I just talk about human dignity as a main end in itself. If you come back to French sociologists Boltanski and Thévenot, it's what we value, what we should value, not as a means to an end, but an end in itself. And it has quite a lot of beauty, if I may say so. I am a big fan as well of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, but there's an issue with them. There are 17 goals and 169 targets and whatnot. How can we chase 17 goals at one point in time? How can we chase 169 targets as part of the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development? I think a ship can only go into one direction, targeting one harbor, and for humanistic management, it's simply human dignity. Not so many, not like three in a triple bottom line. It's human dignity as the main end in itself. So what is there to do? What we need to do is first, as somebody else very famous said, be the change. Let us reflect how our practices, whether we are in business, whether we are supporting businesses, whether we are bringing businesses together, or whether we regulate businesses, or whether we report on businesses, let's reflect if what we do shares this value of human dignity, or whether it stands for 17 or 168, 169 other targets. If we are basically walking the talk ourselves and create or contribute a system that focuses on human dignity, whether we love the people or whether we sustain a system that uses them. And in that sense, drowning in information nowadays with all consulting companies, universities, experts broadcasting information on a daily basis, where we know even less what we should do, let us focus on situational solutions. There are no cookie cutter recipes on what to do precisely in every situation. This general knowledge needs to give way to practical wisdom that has a strong ethical orientation. And there's some process aspects to it as well, which I am sure Ernst will talk about. But let's look for this situational practical wisdom, not the general cookie cutter recipes that apply in every situation. And then we are making good progress. Finally, if I may end with that, let's look for small steps, but those steps that we actually take. We could dream of big solutions, but if they never materialize because they're so complicated or too much to accomplish in the short term, that's not a good thing either. Let's look for steady progress into the right direction, small steps, but that we take for sure, even today, even this week, even this month. Thank you so much for having me and for providing me the opportunity of briefly sharing.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Wolfgang, for giving your views. And one point which he has made about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, and he says out of those 17, one has to reach. It is not practical because of the humans, how they are going to achieve, and without the humanity quotient in that, because there is nothing, everything has to be, one has to achieve. But he says small steps one has to take, and then we can reach, and we will try to have more humanistic approach. And he has given all the examples of how in other the countries, the politicians and everyone is having their approach. So thank you very much, Professor, for giving your views. Definitely, when we will come in the next round, we would like to know something more from you. Now, I would like to invite my next panelist guest, and he's Dr. Ernst von Kimasko. Dr. Ernst is the co-founder of Humanistic Management Network Switzerland. Dr. Ernst is passionate about strengthening the positive impact of business towards a more equitable and more sustainable planet. He is co-founder and leads the Humanistic Management Network and Humanistic Management Center, and is senior research fellow at the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. Professor Ernst has been visiting faculty at universities in Colombia, Germany, India, and Japan, and holds various editorial, reviewer, and board positions. Welcome, Professor Dr. Ernst on our show. Dr. Ernst, you have heard the earlier panelists, and they have given their views about the humanistic management. Definitely, we would like to know from you your views on humanistic management. Dr. Ernst von Kimankowicz, please.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to sit together on this panel with such eminent personalities. And it's a joy to hear all of you speak and learn from and with each other. And just to pick up one point, which I couldn't agree more with, is what Wolfgang last said, is what are the concrete little steps? I think we're looking so much at organizations that have broad, ambitious goals, and they will be reached by 2045. And then, 2045 comes, and then a new broad, big goal will be announced that will be achieved by 2055. And if you ask people, okay, so what are you doing tomorrow? Which is the small little thing that you will actually change on the ground tomorrow, so that in 10 years you're somewhere near this goal? People fall silent quite often. So we have to move away from having these broad, big goals that are far away, and then nothing happens until we're getting close to the deadline of this big, broad goal, and then a new goal is formulated. But that's just to pick up what Wolfgang has said, and to confirm that I think that is one of the challenges we're confronted with. But I want to spend the next 10 minutes or so to talk about 1, 2, and 3. One mental model, one mindset that we need in business. Two macro challenges that businesses are confronted with, or that we as a global community are confronted with, and where business plays an active role and has to play a more active role in addressing these issues. And three pillars, 3 core elements of how we're defining humanistic management within the Humanistic Management Network and Humanistic Management Center, the organizations that I'm active in. So let's start with one mental model. And I think the one mental model, I want to pick up what Dr. Mohan has said. The business of business is business. Fortunately, very, very fortunately, we have, I think, overcome this notion. Whether you look at organizations like the Business Roundtable in the US or the World Economic Forum here in Switzerland, or other business associations, academia, more and more it becomes mainstream and common sense that the business of business is not what it is, but the business of business is to serve society. Now, why is that? Because simply put, if you argue that the business of business is business, you're saying that businesses are self-serving organizations, that they exist to serve themselves. And why should we want that? Why should we as society give legitimacy and want organizations to flourish that tell us openly we only exist to serve ourselves? There is no reason for society to agree to such a concept of business, and there's no reason for us to give legitimacy to such organizations that say we only exist to serve ourselves. Business needs to be purpose-driven. Business needs to be linked in some shape or form to a purpose that is bigger than its self-serving interests. And that is number one. And a friend of mine always says, business is people working together with people to create value for people. So we need to have this one mindset that business has to be and needs to become purpose-led organizations, and that this purpose has to somehow relate to something that's bigger than a self-serving goal set, and that it somehow has to contribute to our capacity to address challenges that we're facing, that somehow it needs to provide goods and services that enhance people's lives, that empower people, that allow for a dignified life for all stakeholders involved. So that is the one mental model we need. Businesses are not self-serving organizations, but businesses are there to serve societal needs. Number two is the 2 points I want to mention as the macro challenges that we as a global community are confronted with. And the first of these macro challenges is, of course, the environmental challenge. I was yesterday at an event at the IMD, one of the business schools in Switzerland, and Bertrand Piccard was talking there, the man who flew around the world on a purely solar-powered airplane. And a fascinating personality. And he was giving the example of the light bulb, where we know that the conventional light bulb has only around 5% of the energy that it produces light with. And the remaining 95% are actually heat. So if we use conventional light bulbs, we're turning 95% of the energy we put into that light bulb into heat. And only 5% to actually do what we want to be doing is to create light with a light bulb. And then in office buildings and shops and so forth, we have to install air conditioning so that we get rid of the heat that the light bulbs produce, while only what we want is light. So we're incredibly wasteful in the way that we're using energy, in the way that we're using resources on this planet. We're currently consuming globally around 3.6 planets. We're using the resources of 3.6, 3.5 in that range planets. We only have one. So on the environmental challenge, we are clearly living above our means. We're consuming more than the planet is giving us. But at the same time, this is not because the planet wouldn't provide for us to live comfortable, decent lives, but it is because we are so incredibly wasteful with what the planet is offering us. So we need to learn to live within our means. That's the first challenge we need to address, where business has to play a role. The second one is what I call the distributional challenge. So it is the question of distribution between people in communities, between countries, within countries, and at a global level. No matter what level you're looking at, distribution is a challenge, and it has become a greater challenge. Now, when we're thinking about distribution, obviously we're thinking about money, first of all, about income distribution, but it is more than that. It is about distribution of access to healthcare, access to clean drinking water, access to education, access to housing. So it is more than just the money that you hand out or the money that people have but it is the distribution of opportunities to live a self-determined life, to live a dignified life. And there we very clearly have a situation where we're biting the hand that feeds us, because the social peace and cohesion, our capacity to live in societies where the individual can prosper and where communities can thrive together, depends on a level of social peace and cohesion that we cannot achieve with ever greater disparities and ever greater inequalities. So this is the second macro challenge that I wanted to mention and highlight, and to move on to three aims or three pillars of how we define humanistic management. And one, the first one and the foundational one, we have heard it now from all speakers before me, and I'm sure that Shiv has something to say on it as well, is dignity, of course. Respect, unconditional respect for dignity. And I just want to highlight 2 points briefly on what this means in real terms. It means on an intra-organizational level within the organization, it means that people are respected, that we respect the human being in their wholeness, that we're not looking at only the instrumental value, like Wolfgang said, people are used and things are loved, but that we are turning that the right way around, that people are loved and things are used. The human being in the organization should be seen, must be seen, and in organizations that respect dignity are seen in their whole, are seen as human beings that bring a lot more to the organization and that have a lot of intrinsic value and not just the instrumental value to the organization. And in consequence, people are treated with respect. And people are treated with respect because of their shared humanity. And it doesn't matter if you're the man at the gate, at the factory gate, like Dr. Mohan said as an example, or if you are the director of the organization. When it comes to our shared humanity, when it comes to the dignity and the respect we deserve, we're all the same. We are equal in our shared dignity. Now, secondly, the question on how we define humanistic management by integrating ethics into management decisions. What we have quite frequently is what we label in business ethics a corrective logic. So we're operating businesses as if only profits matter, and then once in a while a roof collapses on a factory or an oil platform blows up, and then we need to spend a lot of money to correct that. So that is a corrective logic. And what we're arguing in humanistic management is that it is a lot better to build things in a way that they don't break so easily in the first place. So rather than making things in a way that we know they will break and then having to spend a lot to fix it, and on the way having regulatory conflicts, reputational damages, employee disengagement, all the adverse effects that come with such negative events, we can avoid that by building things in a way that they don't break so easily in the first place. And we do that by integrating ethical considerations into management decisions. And the third point of humanistic management, the third pillar of how we're defining humanistic management, is through stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement, simply put, is talk to those people, engage with those people, interests, organizations that you're affecting as a business organization. You have a whole range of societal actors. You have your employees, you have your suppliers, you have your owners, and you have this range of interests, organizations, and individuals that are directly affected by what you do as a business. Talk to them, engage with them, have an ongoing dialogue with all these interests, and not only look at what your shareholders want, but look and learn from all your stakeholders how you can create value for society at large. And if we're combining these three steps, then much of the things that we need to solve, the challenges we need to solve, we have a framework, we have an anchor to reflect if we get closer to solving those or not. So in summary, one mindset we need: the business of business is serving society. We cannot expect to have legitimacy for self-serving attitudes, to have organizations that say we exist to serve only ourselves. That is not going to fly. And more, we're not accepting that anymore. So businesses will need to become purpose-driven. Two, why do we need that? Because we're confronted with two macro challenges, the environmental challenge and the distributional challenge. Three, how do we bring the rubber to the road? We are proposing our humanistic management, 3 pillars consisting of respect for dignity, integrating ethics in management decisions, and engaging with stakeholders. And with that, I want to thank you very much for your attention and for this invitation. And I look forward to Dr. Shiv's talk and our subsequent discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ernst, for giving your views. And he mentioned one in a very, very clear way, that the business is not to only earn money, but what they can give to the society. And that is very, very important point, because if the business is only just to earn money and to give more and more money to the stock stakeholders or shareholders, that is not the thing. According to him, it should be what those things are going for the upliftment of the society and the dignity of the human being. That is very, very important. So humanistic management is very, very clear. Whatsoever business anyone is doing, they should do, but they must give the dignity to the human beings. Thank you very much for your giving such a easy way to understand that the business one should do, earn money, but give back to the society. So, and that give the dignity to the human being. Thank you very much, Dr. Ernst, for giving your views. Now, I would like to invite my last but not the least panelist. He is Professor Dr. Shiv K. Tripathi. Professor Tripathi leads Humanistic Management Network India as chapter lead. He has more than 23 years of experience in teaching, research, and higher education management in India, Kenya, South Africa, Switzerland, Tanzania, and Qatar. He has more than 75 publications, including 6 books. He is member in United Nations Principle for Responsible Management Education, PRME, Anti-Corruption and Poverty Eradication Working Groups. Welcome, Professor Tripathi on our show. Professor Tripathi, you have heard the earlier panelists, and they have given their views about the humanistic management. Definitely being a lead humanistic management network India as a chapter lead, which you are doing here, we would like to know from you your views on the humanistic management. Professor Dr. Shiv K. Tripathi, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lal, for this wonderful opportunity, and very good morning, good afternoon to all. And it's really a matter of great honor and privilege for me to be here with the pioneering humanistic scholars, Professor Raman, Professor Ernst, and wonderful Professor Agrawal. When it comes to humanistic management, during my last 10 years of learning while working with Professor Raman and Professor Ernst, and with humanistic management, I try to look into 2 things. The first is why we are talking about humanistic management in such a formal way. There is a purpose behind. And when I say this, I would like to take you to some of the historical background of last 100 years of evolution, or 100 plus years of evolution of management as a discipline. We started from so-called scientific, operation-focused approach, and then many times talking about social responsibility in 50s, and before that human relations, and always even Drucker and post-Drucker period, we started talking about socio-economic development as a fundamental purpose of management. We all agreed in theory that has to be our objective. But at the same time, when we look into the practice and when we look into the theory side, we find a huge gap. And that has been reported in many executive education surveys, that most leading schools, students and executives, they say that what we practice, we don't learn in the classroom. What is the reason behind? Why we are running this type of ecosystem where there is a deviation between the theory and practice? Because theory says, we all agree, for thousands of years, if you look into the development of the literature, whether it was ancient Indian wisdom or ancient any other contextual wisdom. If you look into that, everywhere we talk about the individual well-being, human well-being, common good, lok sangrah, what we call in India, and serving for society, serving for humanity as well. But when it comes to practice, why do we fail? And when we try to look into the reasons, one is what I understand, human minds can create great programs. But the moment we start trying to program human minds, then there is a problem. And programming human minds, mindset has emerged from one or two influential country contexts from where this modern management practices have, so-called practices have evolved. We have a model, we have a framework, we have approach, and everywhere, instead of adapting and adjusting to the context, we try to see that management models are fabricated. So the balance sheet is more economics driven, rather more the sociology driven, or more anthropology driven, or more psychology driven. And this creates tension within the organizations, whether it is at individual level, or it is at unit level, or it is at division level. Looking into this, in 2010, when Professor Ernst, Dr. Wolfgang, and like-minded scholars started this, this has helped us in creating a movement to link the theory and practice of humanism in more organized form. And that is what we are trying to achieve. But what are the roadblocks? And we understand that these things are required. We understand that everybody individually appreciate, but what is the reason then why we don't adapt it? The influence of the so far evolved theory or knowledge in the management has been so powerful that it will take larger effort, it will take more time, it will take more like-minded people to join hands together and to really work for common good, not only for corporate social responsibility. I would like to give one example in Indian context. India being the first country in the world to have corporate social responsibility as a regulatory requirement in the companies, that 2% of the profits to be spent for certain category of companies, the CSR. And then when we look into this, what the situation is after 8 years of that regulation, I have heard in many debates, in many dialogues, in many board meetings, that people try to justify CSR because that will help in gaining better market image, that will help in gaining better brand image, and they can sell more. So there is something wrong with the fundamentals. And something wrong with the fundamentals when we start our assumption, although we agree that we should be humanistic, we should be driving our efforts towards the humanistic cause. But when it comes to practice, most of the board debates go into how we can give more economic impact to the balance sheet rather than how we can create more humanistic impact on the individuals and on the organizations and society at large. Just very quickly, another example that the countries which have contextualized their management practices have been quite successful. And Japan is one example. Good or bad, but the Japanese management is quite different. We all understand, and it is because of the cultural integration of the management practices into that country, and we have seen that level of passion and entire quality revolution evolving from there. So what I would like to say, that now the time is to integrate theory and practice more, contextualize the management, and keep the common purpose for one humanity, one world. For now, I would like to end here and then we will discuss further. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Tripathi, for giving your views. And what Professor Tripathi says that this is nothing new. It's for thousands and thousands years. Everyone says, and all the literature says that the human dignity, to give the importance to the human individuals, etc. But it's all in theory. Practically, we are not following. He also mentioned about the CSR funds in India. He says that India is the first country which started the CSR funds. But he says the CSR funds being used by the corporates to build their own brand image, which is not the purpose for the CSR fund. The CSR fund is for the social responsibility, corporate social responsibility that they will be giving to the society. So he says that we have to change, we have to integrate all those values and humanistic management. Until unless we will be not doing the purpose for the humanity. And that is very, very important. Thank you very much, Professor Tripathi, for giving your views. Now my question goes to Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal, there used to be a saying called power corrupts man and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Don't you think, like what Professor Tripathi mentioned about the theory and practical, those who get the power in form of money or the chair or whatsoever, whether he become a director of a corporate or he become a political leader, they forget the basic the basic sense of to give the human dignities to others. And that's why this humanistic management is required. Because if you see, especially in India, those who are not that rich, those who are not enjoying any power, they give the the dignity to others in far more way than those who have become rich. Exceptionals are there. You have given few examples, but they are exceptionals. But you know, those who have become directors or managing directors, the chairmen, all the political leaders, irrespective of the party, they become so arrogant that they forget that they are also human and they should give respect to other humans, and their humanistic management is required from that level instead of the what we are doing we think that it is required for everyone. What do you think about this and what are your views about this, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal?
I fully agree with you, Goel Sahab. You have reached the point very quickly and precisely. But you also have to see, especially in the context, where are they coming from? India has had human values in human interactions or social interactions, but never had a very strong history of humanistic management in business or any other form of formal organizations. It was always hierarchical. That is from top to the, and they felt, and I shouldn't like to deny this assumption also, that if you talk to a person nicely, show human dignity, compassion, appreciation, then possibly that person will reduce his commitment or her commitment to work. And as a result, the distance which is required for effecting efficiency as well as productivity may disappear. Equality has never been the name of the game in India. Hierarchy has been. So that is why humanistic management did not find it's a very sincere application in any walk of life, whether it is politicians or management or administrators or anything. If you see the origin of Indian administrative service, which is the offshoot of imperial civil services or ICS, both were developed on the basis of distance. Those were founded that distance creates respect, distance creates dignity, and distance creates productive organizations. Humanistic management challenging that. Why? Because it is coming from the Western thinking from that point of view. So therefore, there is a bit of resistance, or at least I would say passive acceptance rather than active acceptance of the things. Coming back to very clearly in our own, sphere modern, I think this thinking of India will change and change very drastically and very rapidly, because we are now having knowledge workers at work, not only just skilled workers or manual worker at work. Politicians, the point which you referenced, are also now finding that the population they were ruling by caste, creed, religion, or any other form of division now has to be on the basis of social media, social acceptance, the blogs. In other words, that they will also start giving respect to the views of others. So I'm very optimistic that Indian political system or political system anywhere in the world perhaps will be much, much more democratic, much, much more towards humanistic side of interaction rather than hierarchical side of management. That's my view.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Mohanlal Agrawal. Let's hope that the change will come and the change should come. Thank you very much. Now my question goes to Professor Dr. Wolfgang. Professor Dr. Wolfgang, this humanistic management is empowerment and felicitations rather than control. Do you agree?
I think that it's about versatility, right? We do know that there are certain situations in the corporate world and outside of the corporate world where one leadership style will be more effective than others. But to universalize that, to generalize that, would not do justice to our great art of leadership. And in that sense, indeed, if we really want to respect human dignity, then in many, many contexts, this boils down to much more decentralization, much more empowerment. However, there are personalities, there's corporate settings, organizational settings, there are conditions where even those followers that we try to lead in the most humanistic way would demand clarity, top-down clarity. So I wouldn't generalize it necessarily, although when it comes to all other factors being equal, you're right. More empowerment gives more opportunities to respect the talents, the brains, the education, and the individual freedom that we bring. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Now my question goes to Dr. Ans. Dr. Ans, we are talking about this for the management and the college or university level. Don't you think these type of qualities or these to be inculcated from the childhood instead of because if the child has not inculcated this sense of giving the dignity to others, to give the respect to human beings, and if he or she is getting this thing from the very childhood, then definitely when they grow and when they will come to the management college, they will be knowing how to give the humanity, dignity to others. But if we are only trying to put it when although the child from the very childhood, because the difference in India, especially I can say where the rich and poor, there is lots of difference, and the rich child always treat the other poor child in a very derogatory way or not in an equal way. And when they grow and when they reach to the higher education level, they feel that this is something where if we want respect, we have to treat them like this. And as Professor Dr. Agrawal mentioned initially, that if you want, you have to keep the distance, you have to show the authority, and that's why their mindset cannot be changed. Do you agree that we should start from the childhood, this management, this humanistic management, instead of going at the time of the graduate or postgraduate level? What do you say about this, Dr. Ernst?
Well, yes and no. I think it's not an either or, but I think you're spot on in leadership first and foremost is about being a decent human being, right? That's what leadership is. The foundation of leadership is personal, being an having integrity and being a decent human being. That is what matters most in leadership. And so the question is, when do you develop decency as a human being? When is it too late, or when is it too early? Is there a too early? For us in the Humanistic Management Network, for the people as we're sitting here, our role, our function, our career choices have brought us into higher education. So that's where we have a lever. That's where we can become active, and that's where we are active. But that by no means is trying to say that it shouldn't start earlier, or you shouldn't continue later. I mean, executive education matters for sure. Early childhood education matters. It starts in kindergarten. It starts in the homes. It starts in the family values, most certainly. But that doesn't mean that it's too late or wrong to do it in higher education also. So I think we need to, integrate this thinking overall, and it has to accompany the entire cycle of education, of socialization, in order to achieve what we need to achieve. So we are most active in the higher education space. I think it is relevant to do it there also. It is relevant because at least even if people already come into college, into university with a set of values, at least we need to prevent the de-learning of moral values and of adhering to values, which partially is happening. I mean, if you're thinking about an economics education, economics will teach you that free riding on public transport is the right thing to do if the chances of being caught and the subsequent penalties when you're caught are lower than the money that you save when you're free riding. So traditional economics will teach us that free riding is the right thing to do in certain circumstances. Of course, it is not. Of course, we cannot justify that. So we need to make sure that we prevent de-learning, moral de-learning happening in your business, in your college education. And but that doesn't mean we shouldn't start earlier. So it's a both. Yes, let's start in kindergarten. Let's make sure what we can do, that early childhood education, that family values are there to respect one another, to see that when it comes to our shared humanity, there is no difference, no matter where you are in society. But that doesn't mean that it's not a good thing to also carry on in higher education and in adult learning.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Hans, for giving your things. A reply in a detailed way. It has to be from the childhood.
Sir, sorry to interrupt, but can I also get an opportunity to ask a question later whenever you have a moment for me?
Yeah, definitely. I will allow you to ask the question. No problem. Now, my question goes to Professor Tripathi. Professor Tripathi, you mentioned that we are having a very ancient history. And if we see in India, especially the religions like Buddhism or Jain or Jainism or all religions, they always preach for the human dignity. They never have any distinctions between the humanity. And even we saw in our scriptures how they have given the values for the human dignity. Professor Agrawal has mentioned about the latest things, but even if we go in the scriptures, we have so many stories that how at that time the king used to give the human dignity. But during the after that old era, the era which was say about 500 or 600 or 700 years back, that things have changed, and then the human the dignity has gone down because the rurals or those who have came to India or other countries, they want their own authority, and that's why the human dignity has gone down. Now we are following the same thing, like Professor Agrawal mentioned about ICS or IES. Same thing is happening. Still, it is going on. You mentioned about CSR fund. CSR fund is everybody knows this is nothing but to, and there's so many things are happening in the CSR funds just to save the company's image and or to increase their company's image, as well as to show something that the government should not catch hold of them, etc. So what you feel, why we have lost those moral values from the old age to till now, and how it can go up again? What you say about this with the humanistic management, Professor Tripathi?
Thank you for this wonderful question. As I understand and what my learning have been on this area, I see the origin or the ancient Indian wisdom or literature more focusing on human service and collective good. So the entire paradigm has changed now, as you mentioned. Initially, if we look into any of the literature, scriptures, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, or Bodh literature, it all focuses on human dignity, and human is to serve the society and humanity for achieving certain larger goal. And happiness is the part of that. It is derived as a byproduct, because we are not taking from someone, rather we are contributing. Now, what happened that the social purpose shifted. There was influence of power, and then you can see that for last 400 to 500 years, a lot of insecurity created in the society at mass level, because power was concentrated. People started exploiting those who were in power. They could use others, and they could use others as a mean. So at the mass level, a sense of insecurity developed. So, and that is the one reason, even today, if you empower them, those who were insecure by mind, they would be in corruption. You will find their behavior is not ethical, because they want to secure everything first, unless they lose it again. And it has been historical during last 400, 500 years, or say 600 years. And last 50 to 100 years, Professor Agrawal also mentioned that even after the independence, the governance in the country was driven by the system, which was created for some other purpose, not for the independence India. And we continued with that. So what happened? We could maintain the systems, but we failed to maintain the results. And that's where humanistic management comes into the picture now, where we can try to integrate the things. We can bring the best of the all, rather than just serving to some power centers. I would give one example. I was recently in conversation with one professor of literature, and he was very much concerned about the decreasing enrollment in literature programs and philosophy programs and language programs in the university. And he said, what should be done? And then we came to one point that if we look at the evolution of even literature created earlier for humanity. If you look at the ancient literature, for serving the common purpose, then the literature was for praying the kings. And then now we are still continuing with that literature, and no innovation happening, that what should be done, what should be created to serve the current situation. And that's why the application is missing and enrollment is decreasing. So what the purpose of humanistic management is, in a more holistic way, how we can bring the best of the things so that we can serve individuals, organizations, and society at large. And one final thing, in current approach, we look in organization either inside out or outside in, but humanistic management is about all side in. Thank you.
Okay, all side humanistic management is all side in, says Professor Tripathi. Thank you very much. Yes, Professor Agrawal, you want to ask question, but the time is only 2 minutes. So please complete is 2 minutes only for you. Yeah.
Right. Actually, one of the challenges in implementing humanistic management is the intent and the sincerity. If the intent is to show humanity for higher productivity, of fire or hire any other organizational purpose, organizations will become not using that particular thing, and even the recipients will start seeing it as red or some kind of red in that. In other words, intent must be clean. It is not as a productivity tool. Management as a art is not as another way as management as a science was. Scientific management was a tool, but this is not a same way a tool for productivity. This is the point. So I want to know from my fellow speakers, so eminent people, that what are the other challenges in implementing humanistic management in organizations? I'll begin with Professor Amar.
I think you mentioned a wonderful challenge that the implementation is probably as much of importance as our intentions. To me, the main bottleneck is that our mental software, the software of our mind, is just often still too different. We come from such diverse backgrounds, and then we jump immediately into the action instead of just doing some norming before the storming. Too often we should just take a moment and say, hey, what really matters? Why are we here? Why are we doing these things that we do, instead of being busy all the time with 80 emails a day, 120 projects, and so on. So I think that the norming before the storming is often neglected, and that ultimately is a leadership responsibility. But then again, we cannot just blame our leaders if they haven't done their job. As followers, we can simply demand more. We can communicate upwards as well. What are the expectations? Of course, we need to do so diplomatically. But let's simply converge our softwares of the mind before we then execute, before we run then the software.
How about you, Professor? What is your take on that? Unmute yourself, please.
I mean, I agree completely with Wolfgang that it's that the biggest obstacle are the mental models that we have in ourselves. But in order to not just repeat what Wolfgang was saying, but maybe to add one more dimension, is that essentially our management models and our economic thinking comes from a time where capital finance was scarce and resources were abundant. And we are now in the reverse situation. We're now in the situation where financial capital is abundant and resources are scarce. And so we need to rethink some of the fundamental assumptions in our economic and management models in order to be able to educate for this different environment, and in order to be able to use markets and business organizations not only more efficiently, but much more importantly, more effectively. And I think so. To add to the challenges Wolfgang was mentioning, I think on one side it is the scarcities have changed, but our models haven't, and we need to ensure that we stay effective before being so in love with efficiency all the time.
And what about you, Professor?
Oh, man, Professor
Okay,
Agarwal,
okay,
I have to
okay.
stop you here. Time is over now. So sorry for the positive, because of the
No,
positive.
that's okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And so today, viewers, you have seen the humanistic management. The plain and simple thing is that dignity to others. If we will start giving the dignity, you might be a big corporate leader, but if you are not giving the dignity to your own employees, to your own shareholders, to everyone, you will not get the name what you are. Although I would not like to miss the name of Dhirubhai Ambani here, what he has done is he has given the dignity to the shareholders. Many shareholders, they have got their daughters or the son's wedding done because of the dignity, because of the money they generated, but with the dignity. Similarly, corporates have to rethink, and bring this humanistic management in their corporate world. Same, as well as our political leaders should also bring this humanistic approach, give the dignity to others. Then you will see, as Professor Agarwal and other people have mentioned, how the reward will come back, how the others will give you the respect. So this is what is their humanistic management. But there are so many other aspects which I'm sure will be in some other time. We will have more and more discussions on this. Thank you very much. And today's program has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV India, News Gaon Se, Samvad Sarokar News, Bharat Post News, as well as was shown live on Facebook and YouTube. And our endeavor to bring to you every day a new topic in media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. Tomorrow, our topic is hybrid learning. And our panelists are Ms. Lata Goel, Founder Director, Ramanlal Shurewala Public School, Mathura, Dr. Janeshwar Pai Marur, Department of Humanities, NMAM Institute of Technology, Niche, and Ms. Vidya M. Tum and Global TV Best Principal Awardee, United PU and Degree College, Bangalore. So please tune in tomorrow for media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Agrawal. Thank you very much, Professor Tripathi. Thank you very much, Professor Wolfgang. And thank you very much, Dr. Ernest, for giving your very, very enlightening views. And thank you all the viewers for joining and hearing and watching this program, which has definitely very, very enlightening for all of